The tow truck had already lowered its hook beneath the unmarked car when the screaming began, not from the driver, but from the woman standing triumphantly in her robe and slippers on her perfectly mowed lawn, arms crossed like a discount Napoleon. There. Tow it. I don't care if it's a police car. Nobody gets special treatment in my neighborhood, she shouted, completely unaware that the man walking toward her from the house across the street was the very owner of the vehicle and a decorated detective with a badge, a warrant, and a rising look of disbelief on his face. The flashing red and blue lights that lit up her porch were not from the tow truck. And just like that, the HOA's Queen of Chaos was about to become its biggest scandal. The trouble started, like most things involving Karen did, with a clipboard, a whistle, and a parking space. Her obsession with HOA rules bordered on fanatical. She patrolled the cul-de-sac like she was part of some secret suburban militia, snapping photos of license plates, jotting down timestamps, and lecturing delivery drivers like she was handing out divine judgment from the asphalt heavens. The spot in front of the community garden was her sacred turf. It wasn't even officially hers. It belonged to no one, but she treated it like it was inherited from royalty. So when an unfamiliar black sedan appeared there late one evening and didn't move by morning, Karen's nostrils flared with purpose. This was her moment. The irony was, no one else in the neighborhood even noticed the car. That's because the person who drove it was quiet, polite, and incredibly private. Detective Jackson Cole had recently moved in under the radar as part of an ongoing undercover operation. His superiors wanted someone close to a specific property tied to a trafficking ring, and the HOA-run neighborhood offered exactly the right camouflage. Jackson was used to tense situations, but what he hadn't counted on was HOA Karen, who, as far as he could tell, might actually be more terrifying than the criminals he was tailing. Jackson had parked the car there overnight as part of a surveillance move. It was unmarked, equipped with covert cameras, and registered under an alias through the department. He'd done this sort of operation before, but not in a neighborhood where lawn flamingos needed approval from a committee and paint swatches had to be HOA approved. Karen, however, didn't need approval. In her mind, she was the committee. So when she saw the car the next morning, she blew her signature whistle, documented the offense, and immediately called her cousin's towing company. She didn't ask. She didn't warn, she acted. By 10:00 a.m., the tow truck was idling beside the sedan. Neighbors peeked through blinds, some of them filming quietly, knowing from experience that whenever Karen got involved, things got interesting and loud. But even they weren't ready for the twist that was coming. The tow truck driver hesitated when he noticed the government-issued tag on the dash. Karen, are you sure this is okay?" he asked. She waved him off like he was offering expired coupons. "I've already documented the violation. Unauthorized vehicle. No pass displayed. Rules are rules. Tow it." That's when Jackson opened his front door and stepped out, holding his travel mug and calmly assessing the situation. His face was unreadable, but his eyes flicked between the tow truck, the woman screeching on the sidewalk, and the barely touched surveillance equipment he now feared might get yanked into a scrapyard. "Excuse me," he said, walking over. "Is there a reason you're trying to tow my car?" Karen's voice went up several octaves. "This is a private parking zone for community residents only. I've never seen you before. You must be a guest, and guests don't get to park in reserved areas." Jackson raised an eyebrow. "I am a resident. I moved in 2 doors down." She narrowed her eyes, then glanced at her clipboard. "That's impossible. I managed the residency list." Jackson slowly pulled out his badge and held it up for her to see. "Detective Jackson Cole. I'm with the county, and that vehicle is part of an active investigation." The silence that followed could have vacuumed leaves off the street. Karen's face went through several stages: confusion, disbelief, denial, and finally, indignation. "That doesn't exempt you from HOA protocol," she barked. "If you wanted to park here, you should have submitted a form." Jackson sighed. "Ma'am, this vehicle is equipped with surveillance tech. If it had been towed, you'd be interfering with a felony investigation." Karen scoffed like he just accused her of treason. "Are you threatening me? Because I know my rights." The tow truck driver, now fully aware of the disaster unfolding, quickly unhooked the car and backed away, muttering something about needing to check paperwork. Jackson turned to him. "You might want to make sure your license is up to date too. The department will be following up." Karen's mouth opened and closed like a malfunctioning robot. "I'll be filing a complaint," she shouted, "with your department and the HOA and the mayor." What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that her actions had just triggered a formal investigation. Jackson filed the report that afternoon, complete with body cam footage, timestamps, and a growing list of past complaints neighbors had filed about Karen's abuse of power. And that was just the beginning, because when Karen tried to spin the whole thing on social media the next day, posting a video of her confrontation with Jackson, edited to make her look like the victim, she didn't realize that the original footage would surface within hours, broadcasted from multiple angles, including doorbell cams, neighbor phones, and yes, Jackson's own footage. The internet had a field day, but the biggest storm was yet to come, because when the Internal Affairs Department dug into the towing company Karen had hired, they discovered it wasn't just an isolated incident. The company had racked up dozens of illegal tow complaints, most of them tied back to one Suburban HOA, run by one clipboard-wielding tyrant named Karen. And now the law was circling her house, and not just because of her unlicensed tow operation. As Jackson reviewed his notes that evening, sipping from the same travel mug he held during the showdown, he looked out the window to see Karen furiously pacing her yard, barking into a phone, probably trying to call someone who could help her fix this. But there was no fixing it now. Not when you've tried to tow a cop car from a federal operation and dared to argue about it on your own lawn. The case had officially begun. Karen had always believed that if you yelled something with enough confidence and clutched a clipboard tightly enough, it became law. The day after her tow truck stunt backfired, she wasn't hiding in shame. She was preparing for war. She summoned an emergency HOA meeting to be held in her backyard, complete with folding chairs, stale lemonade, and a megaphone. Most of the residents showed up out of curiosity more than loyalty, intrigued by the drama and gossipy behind their sunglasses. Karen stood beneath a banner that read, "Neighborhood Order May TTers," and she opened the meeting by announcing that a rogue law enforcement officer was violating HOA policy and threatening the sanctity of their community. She claimed the badge was fake, the car was a bluff, and that she had every right to enforce community integrity. Detective Cole didn't plan to attend the circus, but when his name was mentioned on the neighborhood message board, accused of being an imposter who faked residency, he decided to drop by. He arrived in full uniform this time, quietly stepping through the hedge and taking a seat at the edge of the group. Karen, spotting him mid-rant, pointed her megaphone in his direction and demanded he state his purpose. Cole calmly stood up, introduced himself again, and even offered to show his credentials to anyone interested. He explained his undercover role in the neighborhood, the sensitive nature of his operation, and how the car was legally placed and vital to an ongoing investigation. Most people nodded. Some even apologized, but not Karen. She barked over him, saying that police or not, HOA rules apply to everyone equally, and accused him of using his badge to intimidate law-abiding citizens. Cole simply raised his eyebrows and said, "Ma'am, I haven't ticketed anyone. I haven't enforced anything. You're the one who ordered a private towel without due process." She turned red. "This is not a courtroom. This is my neighborhood," she shouted. Cole didn't flinch. "You're right, and I live here too. That makes it our neighborhood, and I'm not the one violating state towing laws." The crowd started murmuring. A few people shifted uncomfortably. One neighbor, a middle-aged man named Victor who ran the neighborhood barbecue every summer, leaned over to his wife and whispered, "He's got a point." Karen saw the shift and panicked. She doubled down. She said she would be filing formal complaints to the police department, the mayor's office, the city council, and anyone else who would listen. Cole, still calm, simply nodded. "You're free to do that. Just make sure you include the part where you tried to tow a government vehicle and interfere with a felony investigation." Later that evening, Karen did exactly what she promised. She uploaded a dramatic video to her social media page titled "Officer Bullies HOA Leader in Her Own Neighborhood." The video was heavily edited, cutting out her screaming, the tow truck, and even Cole's introduction. What remained was a choppy, narratively manipulated mess designed to rile people up. And it worked. Within hours, her loyal online followers were flooding the local department's page with angry comments, threatening to protest government overreach and fake badges in HOA neighborhoods. Some even doxed Cole's address. Ironically, the one Karen had claimed didn't belong to any resident. The department took the threat seriously. An internal investigation was temporarily launched, not against Cole, but into the situation itself. They wanted to make sure the integrity of the surveillance operation hadn't been compromised. Cole cooperated fully, handing over reports, footage, and even recommending body cam videos from the incident for review. What they found wasn't just clean, it was damning. Karen had no legal authority to order a towel without notifying the vehicle owner, and the company she used didn't have the proper municipal license to operate in the county. Even worse, complaints started coming in from other neighborhoods about the same tow truck. Unauthorized removals, excessive fees, property damage. All of it connected to a small, unregistered business run by a man named Troy, Karen's cousin. With dots now connecting and red flags piling up, the department escalated the situation to county code enforcement. Meanwhile, the residents of the neighborhood were having their own meetings, private group chats and porch gatherings where they finally began questioning Karen's authority. Stories poured out like floodgates had opened. One woman shared how Karen fined her for grass too long while she was recovering from surgery. A teenager said his skateboard was confiscated by Karen for being a motorized nuisance, even though it wasn't. Another man said she tried to ban his classic car from the driveway because it clashed with community aesthetics. One of the former HOA treasurers, a quiet man named Benjamin, finally came forward. He had stepped down a year earlier, claiming family reasons, but he now revealed the truth. Karen had pressured him to sign off on expenses that didn't make sense. Landscaping jobs that never happened, tech upgrades to cameras that were never installed, catered events billed to the HOA budget. When he questioned her, she threatened to smear his reputation, implying he'd mismanaged funds. Out of fear, he resigned. Cole encouraged Benjamin to come forward officially, and with his statement and receipts from HOA accounts, a financial audit was requested. Karen, sensing the walls closing in, began gaslighting the community in desperation. She said the audit was a political attack, claimed that she had improved the neighborhood, and that those questioning her were jealous of her leadership. But this time, no one was buying it. The seeds of doubt had been planted, and now they were growing fast. The tow truck company was the first thread to unravel. Officers visited the listed business address and found it was just a mailbox at a strip mall. No garage, no office, no permit. When they tracked Troy down, he tried to brush them off until he realized how serious the charges were, especially the accusation of towing a police vehicle without lawful grounds. He offered to make things right, but the damage was done. Investigators seized his phone records, financial transactions, and GPS logs. What they found tied him back to dozens of shady tows, most of them green-lit by Karen herself. Still, Karen strutted around the neighborhood like nothing was happening. She even taped a new sign to the lamppost outside the community garden. No unmarked vehicles, police included. Cole saw it during one of his morning walks and chuckled. She was digging her own hole deeper by the day, and the deeper she went, the more the community watched in silent disbelief, waiting for the moment when her castle of control would finally collapse. It wouldn't take long. The department was nearly ready to issue a formal report. The financial audit was underway, and someone had already sent a tip to the local news. The fire Karen had started with her obsession over a single parking spot had turned into a 5-alarm legal blaze, and the person with the least awareness of just how hot things had gotten was Karen herself. Karen's sense of control had always been rooted in the illusion that no one would dare push back. For years, she had operated like a mini-dictator, manipulating neighbors with passive-aggressive notes, weaponizing HOA bylaws like they were federal codes, and intimidating anyone who questioned her authority. But now, for the first time, that illusion was starting to crack. Detective Cole hadn't just resisted, he had flipped the script and the ripple effect was growing by the day. Her precious clipboard had lost its magic, and the people she once bullied with fake fines and icy glares were quietly turning against her. Everything escalated when the county code enforcement team delivered a subpoena to the HOA office. It wasn't a formal building, just a small converted room inside the clubhouse Karen had claimed as her executive suite. They arrived early, while Karen was out power walking with her dog, Cupcake. And by the time she returned, there were 2 inspectors going through HOA records and copying digital files from a desktop that hadn't been updated since 2012. Karen marched straight to them and demanded they leave, waving a printout of the HOA charter like it was a restraining order. One of the inspectors calmly handed her the warrant. She snatched it from his hand, read the first few lines, and suddenly turned pale. The warrant covered misuse of HOA funds, improper towing practices, and potential civil fraud. It also cited multiple witness statements, including those from her own former treasurer and several residents who had suffered from her fabricated violations. Karen stormed into the street, furious, and began ranting to anyone who would listen about government overreach, personal vendettas, and how the deep state had infiltrated her community. Most people just nodded politely and walked away, not wanting to be filmed on the HOA's aging CCTV system, which Karen still insisted on personally reviewing every Tuesday. That same day, something else unfolded that made Karen's blood boil. A group of residents posted anonymous flyers around the neighborhood announcing a vote to recall the current HOA president. The flyer listed a series of grievances: misuse of funds, harassment, improper enforcement of rules, and embarrassment to the community. It ended with a simple line: "Let's take our neighborhood back." Karen tore every copy she could find off lamp posts, mailboxes, and community boards, but they just kept reappearing. That evening, someone posted a digital version to the community Facebook group, and within hours it had over 100 likes and dozens of supportive comments. In her panic, Karen tried to pivot the narrative. She organized a town hall in the community park and brought in a local radio host she knew from high school who specialized in fringe conspiracy theories. She told him she was being targeted by corrupt cops and shady neighbors who were jealous of her leadership. The radio host, wearing sunglasses and holding a portable microphone like he was reporting live from a war zone, interviewed her next to the garden gazebo while a few confused residents awkwardly watched from picnic tables. The interview was later uploaded online with the title "HOA President Harassed by Rogue Cop," but it was quickly drowned out by the real footage from multiple angles that showed Karen screaming about parking spots and trying to tow a government vehicle. Meanwhile, Cole continued his quiet push behind the scenes. The department was now coordinating with the county prosecutor's office. It turned out that the towing company Karen used was not only unlicensed, but had been collecting cash-only payments with no official receipt. Several people from other communities came forward with similar stories: cars towed for unclear reasons, excessive release fees, and zero documentation. Karen's cousin Troy was also in hot water. His phone records showed frequent texts with Karen right before and after each HOA towing incident. Even worse, GPS logs revealed several tows had been ordered while the vehicles were still legally parked on private driveways. Back in the neighborhood, a subtle but powerful shift was happening. Neighbors who once kept quiet were now exchanging stories on group chat. A retired couple, the Wilsons, revealed how Karen had once fined them for leaving a holiday wreath on their door past January 15th. Another woman admitted Karen had tried to get her evicted for hosting a baby shower with more than 6 cars on the block. One man pulled up drone footage he'd taken for fun last year, which just so happened to capture a tow truck hauling a car at midnight from a house that had never received a warning. Every thread they pulled unraveled more of Karen's control, but the real blow came during a surprise audit reveal. The county had completed a preliminary investigation into the HOA's financial records, and the results were damning. Thousands of dollars in event planning expenses had no corresponding receipt. Several maintenance jobs listed in the budget had never been completed, and one of the biggest red flags was a repeated invoice labeled Executive Travel Fund, used to pay for multiple trips Karen took out of state for so-called HOA conventions that never existed. When asked to provide proof, Karen said she'd lost the receipts in a filing accident. Cole and the audit team presented the findings at a special meeting. Karen showed up 15 minutes late, wearing a red pants, suit, and sunglasses, and tried to interrupt the presentation by shouting about forged documents. She claimed the treasurer had vendettas, the residents were staging a coup, and that Cole had planted fake evidence. But by that point, it didn't matter. The proof was there. Even the most loyal residents couldn't ignore the numbers on paper. The HOA account had been drained to pay for Karen's ego trips, landscaping that never happened, and security features that were just dummy cameras installed by a high schooler for $20. To add insult to injury, Cole had filed an additional complaint regarding harassment. Karen had taped a note to his front door earlier in the week, saying he was under HOA surveillance and subject to rule violations regardless of badge. She signed it with her title and left a printed photo of his parked car. That, combined with her attempts to block him from meetings and file false complaints, was enough to file charges of intimidation and abuse of authority. Karen tried one last move. She summoned the HOA legal consultant, a semi-retired lawyer named Gregory who once handled parking ticket appeals. But even Gregory refused to stand by her, citing conflict of interest, and quietly slipping out the back of the clubhouse when he saw the news cameras setting up. Karen was alone now, cornered by her own missteps. As the sun set that evening, the recall vote was officially scheduled. Residents gathered on porches, passed around lemonade, and whispered excitedly about what would happen next. Karen, meanwhile, stood on her lawn, pacing with her arms crossed, glaring at every person who walked by. She still believed she could bluff her way through it. She had no idea that the worst was yet to come, and this time it wouldn't be an audit or a complaint. The next knock at her door would come with handcuffs. The day of the recall vote arrived, and the entire neighborhood felt like it was holding its breath. Every lawn was freshly cut, every porch occupied with quiet conversations, and for once, nobody was hiding behind curtains. Karen watched it all from her front window like a general surveying a battlefield. She still believed she had control. She wore her infamous red blazer again and spent the morning pacing her front lawn, loudly repeating her campaign speech to Cupcake the dog and anyone unlucky enough to pass by. "If we allow law enforcement to trample HOA rules," she declared into her phone's recording app, "we open the gates to chaos." But this time, no one stopped to listen. She didn't realize yet that chaos had already answered her invitation weeks ago, and today it was delivering a package. The community center filled up faster than anyone expected. People who hadn't attended HOA meetings in years came back with their ballots, some with toddlers, some with lawn chairs, all carrying silent resolve. A large whiteboard at the front displayed the agenda. Recall vote first, followed by financial update, then legal inquiries. Karen tried to hijack the meeting early, grabbing the microphone and launching into a speech about preserving the HOA's values, but she was politely interrupted by the new acting secretary, a middle school teacher named Olivia, who had once been fined by Karen for painting her mailbox teal. Olivia calmly explained that Karen was not allowed to speak until the vote was concluded. Karen tried to object but was shut down with a rule Karen herself had once enforced: no interruptions during board proceedings. Outside the meeting, Detective Cole waited. He wasn't attending the vote. That part was for the residents. His presence there was for a different reason. His department, in coordination with the county prosecutor, had secured the last piece they needed. An affidavit from Troy, the tow truck cousin, had just been signed. Under pressure, Troy admitted Karen had not only ordered towels for personal grudges, but also received a cut of every cash fee collected. He described how she'd send photos and instructions, sometimes demanding immediate pickups, and once even asked him to lose a car in a junkyard if the owner didn't pay up fast enough. Cole held the signed confession in his hand as officers arrived quietly in the parking lot, unmarked but ready. Inside the clubhouse, the votes were counted quickly. It wasn't even close. 91% of the residents voted to remove Karen as HOA president, and several followed up by nominating Olivia as her immediate replacement. When the results were announced, a small round of applause broke out, followed by an awkward silence as everyone looked at Karen. She stood frozen, her face locked in a mix of disbelief and rage. "You can't do this," she said quietly, then louder, "You can't do this. Without me, I built this neighborhood." But no one responded. Someone unplugged the microphone, and Olivia calmly asked her to step aside so the rest of the meeting could continue. Karen stormed out of the clubhouse, slamming the door hard enough to make the frame shudder. She stomped across the lawn to her house, muttering threats and legal terms she didn't fully understand. By the time she reached her porch, she didn't notice the two officers who had already stepped out of an SUV across the street. They approached calmly, one carrying a folder, the other with a body cam already rolling. Karen turned around when she heard the gravel crunch beneath their boots and immediately went on the offensive. "If you're here to harass me on behalf of that so-called detective, I suggest you turn right around," she snapped, pointing toward the street. One officer held up his badge and began to speak. "Karen, we're here on official business. You are being placed under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, obstruction of a legal investigation, and multiple counts of unauthorized vehicle seizure." Karen froze. For a moment, she blinked rapidly, as if trying to blink away reality. Then she screamed. It wasn't the kind of scream that evoked sympathy. It was sharp, shrill, almost theatrical. She shouted about her rights, claimed she was being framed, threatened to sue the county, the department, and the HOA itself. When the officers moved in to handcuff her, she pulled away, grabbed the garden hose, and sprayed them. "Get off my property." "I know the law," she shrieked, drenched and trembling. The officers were patient, seasoned. One of them calmly stepped through the water spray and grabbed her wrist. "Karen, resisting will only make things worse," he said. She struggled for another moment before collapsing onto her knees, mascara running, the hose still sputtering onto her lawn. Neighbors peeked out from behind doors and porches, some filming, others just watching silently. No one intervened, no one protested. This time, the clipboard couldn't save her. The image of Karen on her own lawn, soaked, screaming, and in handcuffs, would be burned into the memory of the neighborhood forever. As she was escorted to the patrol car, Cupcake barked from behind the screen door. She tried to call out orders to nearby neighbors, but none of them moved. The car door shut, and the silence that followed felt like fresh air after a storm. Back at the clubhouse, Cole finally entered, holding Troy's affidavit. He handed it to the new HOA board members, then took a seat in the back. Olivia read the highlights aloud, her voice steady and clear. The room gasped when she got to the part about the junkyard disposal request, and a few people murmured curses under their breath. The HOA board voted to cooperate fully with county investigators, agreed to restructure all towing policies, and launched a fund to reimburse residents who had been unfairly targeted by Karen's reign. Later that evening, Cole walked through the neighborhood like any other resident. For the first time since he moved in, neighbors greeted him openly. One family invited him over for dinner. Another dropped off cookies at his door. Someone hung a small, handmade sign on the lamppost near where Karen tried to tow his car weeks earlier. It read, "Reserved for Detective Cole. No Karens allowed." He laughed quietly, taking a picture to send to his department. Across town, Karen sat in a holding cell, wrapped in a blanket and muttering about bylaws. She asked to speak to a lawyer, but the one she had on retainer was her cousin's friend who mostly handled traffic tickets. The real lawyers, the ones who would be involved in the fraud case, weren't on her side. Her phone call went unanswered. Her clipboard was gone, and for the first time in years, nobody was listening. The neighborhood, once held hostage by one woman's delusion of authority, was finally free, and as the sun dipped below the rooftops, the only sound was laughter from backyards and the quiet hum of a community finally at peace. The reign of HOA Karen was over, not with a vote, but with a warrant. Karen's arrest was just the beginning of the unraveling. Within 48 hours, the footage of her shouting at officers, being handcuffed on her pristine lawn, and screeching about deep state conspiracies had gone viral. It appeared on every major subreddit related to justice, public freakouts, and entitled people. Someone even remixed her "I am the HOA" rant into a trap beat that racked up hundreds of thousands of views overnight. While the neighborhood celebrated a long-awaited return to peace, The rest of the country watched her downfall with popcorn in hand. But behind the viral fame and digital mockery, a very real legal case was beginning to tighten around her like a vice. Karen was arraigned on multiple counts: fraudulent financial activity tied to HOA funds, illegal towing practices, harassment, impersonation of authority, and obstruction of justice. Her attorney, a jittery man named Holloway, who clearly regretted accepting the case, tried to negotiate a plea deal almost immediately. But the DA's office, backed by Cole's airtight documentation, wasn't offering leniency. There were too many victims, too much evidence, and far too many people watching for them to consider going soft. The case had become a symbol, proof that no one, not even the self-appointed queen of a cul-de-sac, was above the law. In the weeks leading up to the trial, the community moved forward with surprising speed. The new HOA board, headed by Olivia, worked closely with residents to clean up the mess Karen had left behind. Dozens of unjust fines were refunded, illegal citations removed from property records, and HOA bylaws rewritten with clear checks and balances to prevent future abuse. They even launched a digital transparency portal so that any resident could review budgets and board decisions in real time. Where fear and frustration once lingered, trust began to take root again. Cole continued to assist discreetly, offering legal insight when needed and occasionally joining board meetings, always modest and quiet, never once taking credit for the domino effect his presence had triggered. Karen, meanwhile, spent her days in court-ordered silence, released on bail but under strict restrictions. She wasn't allowed within 100 feet of the HOA property or to contact any board members. She moved in temporarily with her sister in a different county and was spotted once by a former neighbor working at a local thrift store under the table. When asked by someone if she was that HOA lady from the viral video, she claimed it was a lookalike, but everyone knew the truth. The dramatic fall from HOA ruler to internet punchline had shattered her pride more than the actual legal charges. Her name had become shorthand for suburban tyranny, and even the people who once defended her had gone quiet. The courtroom hearings drew steady attention. Every time Karen appeared, she wore an oversized scarf and sunglasses, like a celebrity dodging paparazzi. Though the press didn't need to embellish anything, the facts alone were enough. The prosecution laid out a detailed trail of financial misconduct: fake vendor payments, receipts for community events that never occurred, unexplained charges for luxury hotel stays during alleged HOA conferences that didn't exist, and thousands spent on security upgrades that turned out to be dummy cameras installed by her nephew. Then came the forged violation notices, some with cut and pasted signatures and fabricated timestamps. Residents testified one by one, telling their stories of harassment, intimidation, and retaliation when they dared question her authority. Karen's defense leaned heavily on denial. She claimed she was misunderstood, that her efforts were only meant to protect property values, and that any mistakes were clerical errors or the fault of her cousin's towing business. But under cross-examination, her excuses crumbled. Emails, text messages, surveillance footage, and even audio clips captured by neighbors painted a picture of someone who had long believed she could act without consequence. The jury wasn't buying it. Neither was the judge, who during one particularly damning day of testimony paused to ask Karen directly, "Can you explain why you listed a waterslide rental for a non-existent HOA family fun day in December?" Her answer, "It was conceptual budgeting," was met with stunned silence and then muffled laughter from the gallery. The verdict came swiftly, guilty on multiple counts. The sentence wasn't just monetary penalties and restitution, though those were steep. It included community service, a ban from holding any HOA or civic leadership position for a decade, and a suspended sentence contingent on good behavior. Karen stood motionless as the sentence was read, staring at the floor, with no clipboard to cling to, no whistle to blow, no bylaws to weaponize. Her empire had been made of paper, and it burned quickly once the truth set fire to it. The neighborhood, however, experienced a renaissance of sorts. With Karen gone, the community hosted its first real block party in years. There was music, food, games for kids, and even a dunk tank featuring a volunteer in a blonde wig and sunglasses labeled "Not Karen." Laughter filled the air in a way it hadn't in a long time. The once strained relationships between neighbors mended quickly as they realized how much of the tension had stemmed from one person's toxic rule. People put out porch lights again. Wind chimes returned. Lawn decorations flourished. The rigid silence that had plagued the streets had been replaced with life and joy. Cole was invited as the guest of honor. When he arrived, the crowd erupted into applause. Someone handed him a slice of cake shaped like a parking ticket, and others insisted he make a speech. He kept it short and humble, thanking everyone for their courage to speak up and promising he'd always be just next door if they needed him. A group of residents unveiled a new sign posted near the community center entrance. It read, "Community First. No more dictatorships. This neighborhood is a Karen-free zone." Below it was a small plaque that said, "Dedicated to those who stood up." In a final twist, news came a month later that Karen had attempted to start a new HOA-style community watch group in her sister's neighborhood. It lasted 6 days. By day 7, residents petitioned for her removal, citing bizarre citation attempts, fake patrol uniforms, and one unforgettable incident involving her trying to measure a neighbor's flower bed with a laser pointer. She was quietly asked to leave, and her sister reportedly changed the locks not long after. And so her legend faded into internet archives and legal databases, a cautionary tale of power unchecked and arrogance unrestrained. But for those who had lived through it, it was more than a story. It was a reminder that real communities don't thrive on control and fear. They thrive on connection, fairness, and accountability. The neighborhood she once ruled by force had found its voice, reclaimed its dignity, and proved that even the loudest bullies eventually get silenced by the truth. And in the end, it wasn't revenge that won. It was justice, served not with malice, but with community spirit.